Some things a lawyer has to do aren't very pleasant.
It screams murder.
But when it stops screaming and starts following the rules of evidence, I'll start listening.
Despite its seemingly innocuous ending, Perry Mason revealed a startling treachery that left the characters in disbelief. Raymond Burr was betrayed by CBS without so much as a phone call when they begged him to film one more season in color. They found out the show was permanently canceled while the team was still filming. Interestingly, in the very last courtroom scene ever shot, the guy responsible for Perry Mason made an appearance to play the judge. Real tears were captured on camera as 9 years of television history drew to a close with a secret that was meant to remain hidden. Hollywood had destroyed Earl Stanley Gardner's brainchild, Perry Mason, so he was wary of the studio. Even worse than the 1930s movies was the radio program, which turned his incisive courtroom anecdotes into soap opera filler and failed miserably at giving the character any emotional resonance. Mason was removed from one project due to Gardner's intense dislike of it, and he vowed to himself that he would never again allow anybody to use his character without his explicit consent. Then Gail Patrick showed up. She had studied law, appeared in more than 60 films, and, most importantly, understood Gardner's desires. So she was more than simply another Hollywood name. She was able to get near enough to Gardner to have meaningful talks through her husband, who happened to be his literary agent. Through attentive listening and considerate boundary setting, she gradually gained his confidence. In return for Gardner's confidence, Gail became one of the first women to hold the role of president of Paisano Productions, Gardner's own production firm. Their proposal of Perry Mason to CBS was met with resistance from the network. Patrick quickly put an end to their desire for it to be live and theatrical, like a soap opera. Any actress would crumble under the intense scrutiny of a live courtroom play. She knew it. The Edge of Night, a soap opera, was nevertheless developed by CBS. It was a long-running show that was unrelated to Perry Mason. Patrick, on the other hand, advocated for a more intelligent solution, filming episodes in the style of I Love Lucy, so that each performance could be fine-tuned and reused for years. She had a point. It rendered Perry Mason ageless and revolutionized courtroom drama production. In 1956, Paisano Productions filmed the pilot episode The Case of the Moth-Eaten Mink, paying for it out of their own cash. It was a hefty bet, costing roughly $100,000, but the quality was worth it. Gardner was really astonished. In his letter to Gail, he expressed his disbelief at what he had witnessed. He felt his vision had been realized at last. However, casting the part of Mason wasn't a walk in the park. Even when tried with A-listers like William Holden, Richard Carlson, and Fred MacMurray, something seemed odd. The role required dominance, intelligence, and presence, none of which Gardner ever provided in his writings about Mason. Raymond Burr was really trying out for the part of Hamilton Berger, the district attorney, and not Mason. He considered himself a master of villain roles and wondered whether he could pull off another one here. Strangely, though, he always stole the show whenever he read alongside an auditionee for Mason. He possessed power. He was powerful. Even the producers couldn't help but notice it in the end. Mason was supposed to be Burr. Then the real test arrived. The reaction was immediate when Gardner observed Burr's screen test, pronounced as, "That's Perry Mason!" He sprang to his feet and pointed. Finally, after years of letdowns, Gardner seen his fictional persona materialize just as he had envisioned. Burr was cast in the role after that one time. It was just as deliberate when they cast the remaining members of the squad. In the role of the devoted secretary, Della Street, Barbara Hale was cast. Private investigator Paul Drake was cast by William Hopper, who had already auditioned for the role of Mason. Hamilton Berger, the district attorney who was never able to defeat Mason in court, was played by William Talman, the actor Burr had originally sought out. Lieutenant Trogg, the principled yet suspicious police detective, was played by Ray Collins. When the sitcom debuted in 1957, viewers could feel the connection between the two leads because of how quickly they bonded. Burr's commitment extended beyond the realm of acting. After hearing Gail Patrick say, "You're perfect, but you need to lose weight," he took her advice to heart. Burr lost about 100 pounds in a month, completely changing his appearance and shattering his stereotypical image. For years, viewers trusted his assured, astute legal intellect because he was no longer the antagonist in thrillers. Still, they hadn't won the weight war yet. Over the course of the show's lengthy run, Burr gradually reclaimed it. Nonetheless, labor continued unabated. He claimed that the long hours of filming helped him keep it off, but he later admitted that the pressure to sustain the appearance was too much. Burr subtly battled to maintain his fitness while giving one of the most memorable performances in television history. Perry Mason wasn't your average crime drama when it debuted in the late 1950s. It was ahead of its time and intelligent. They were practically constructing a genuine law office, not a TV drama behind the scenes, since they took legal accuracy so seriously. Ben Brady, the producer, was formerly an attorney for famous actors and actresses. The narrative editor, Gene Wang, who was also a lawyer, checked the script for any clumsy legal blunders. Gail Patrick Jackson, on the other hand, was so meticulous about every aspect of the legal process that she nearly became a lawyer before Hollywood beckoned. This included the proper way a lawyer should enter a courtroom and interrogate witnesses. The three of them collaborated tirelessly. They spent nearly 2 years perfecting the show's appearance and sound before it even aired, and they were picky about performers who could pass for actual attorneys even during casting. However, without Earl Stanley Gardner, who initially developed Perry Mason, none of it would have been significant. Rather than relinquish his persona and disappear, Gardner insisted on maintaining command. Powerful command. An unprecedented 60% ownership stake was his from his agreement with CBS. There was a lengthy procedure for each screenplay to reach him, and whenever it did, he would analyze it with comments befitting a lawyer. Nothing good came out of his recommendations. When he declared something had to change, it did. He wanted it that way, even if the writers were scared. Studio destruction of Perry Mason was something he would not stand for, having witnessed it once before. He went to such far as to compose an episode Bible outlining Perry's ideal demeanor, vocabulary, and philosophy. Gardner was engaged for all 271 episodes, approving screenplays while simultaneously penning new novels on the side, and CBS agreed to everything only to get the rights. The Moth-Eaten Mink, the pilot episode, followed. The show didn't premiere for months after filming wrapped in late 1956. The show deviated significantly from the norm when it debuted, with gloomy lighting, creeping shadows, and camera angles that evoked a classic noir rather than a courtroom drama. In Perry's workplace, a firefight broke out, gangsters concealed in plain sight, and mysterious letters were stashed beneath tables. Additionally, Raymond Burr appeared different, slimmer, with sharper features and a tough guy cap that gave him the appearance of a detective rather than a lawyer. The set pieces were new as well. Paul Drake still hadn't gone blonde, and the furniture had a gritty, worn appearance. The program's aesthetic evolved from that style to one that was more polished and consistent as it progressed, but its core values remained unchanged. The show was intelligent, incisive, and created by individuals who thought a courtroom drama had to seem authentic. Nobody could have predicted that Perry Mason, which debuted in 1957, would become the most watched television show in the United States. However, audiences connected with the courtroom drama right away. Not only did it get viewers, but it shot up the ratings. Season 1 saw it settle at number 43, Season 2 saw it rise to number 19, and Season 3 saw it in the top 10. With over 15 million households tuning in every Saturday night, the show peaked at 5th place nationwide. CBS was so sure it could outdo the opposition that they even shifted the show to Thursday evenings in 1962, and it succeeded. Perry Mason maintained its viewership for an unprecedented 9 seasons and 271 episodes, remaining in the top 20 all the way up to its 8th season. The show was utilized by CBS's upper management to compete with shows like Bonanza on NBC. It was about more than simply ratings, though. Additionally, the program swiftly gained the admiration of critics. Nominations for Outstanding Dramatic Series came in the first year it ran. Barbara Hale and Raymond Burr both became famous very quickly. Burr won 2 Emmys for Best Lead Actor, and Hale won 1 for Best Supporting Actress. His already excellent performance was further enhanced by the fact that Burr appeared in practically every scene of every episode. In addition, Perry Mason and Burr were honored with TV Guide Awards based on reader voting, further demonstrating the immense love that regular people had for them. Perhaps most notably, the American Bar Association presented the show with its inaugural Silver Gavel Award for its adherence to factuality and adherence to legal principles. The program became more than simply entertainment. It became a weekly ritual for viewers, even if Perry somehow managed to win every case he took on. Weekends at 7:30 p.m. from 1957-1962 have to have meant that Perry Mason was on. Each family made sure everyone had supper, cleaned up after themselves, and didn't schedule anything that may cause problems. More than a performance, it was an observance. Viewers braced themselves for yet another courtroom showdown as the dramatic score at the beginning established the mood. CBS thought airing it early in the evening would allow families to watch together, and they were right. For 5 years running, the show was the most popular show to air on Saturday. The audience persisted even after the show switched to Thursdays. It was unusual to find such unwavering devotion, but Perry Mason merited it. The fact that it resonated with viewers of all ages, grandparents, children, and adults alike, was what really set the show apart. School teachers brought it up, and once a group of nuns even phoned CBS to express their displeasure when an episode didn't show. A publication made light of the fact that St. Theodore's nuns were just as engrossed in the program as the general public. By visiting fans in hospitals, responding to their letters, and never taking their devotion for granted, Raymond Burr appeared to comprehend the profound impact the program had on individuals. The show had been a part of viewers' life for over 10 years, until it concluded in 1966. Some had been hooked from the start. By the time the last case was solved, they were adults, and their devotion had never wavered. Even after the TV movies premiered in 1985, the same fans eagerly returned, demonstrating that Perry Mason was more than simply a popular program. It had a lasting impact on people's lives. When television was at its peak, Perry Mason was unbeatable. Someone died, someone was accused, and week after week, Perry would pull a surprise in court. It was a pattern that every episode followed. He was the unbeatable hero. However, in 1963, an unprecedented event occurred. A single occurrence completely turned the world on its head. Actually, Mason was on the losing end of a case in the case of the deadly verdict. Janice Barton, his client, was found guilty of killing her aunt and given the death penalty. Viewers couldn't believe it when Perry's spotless run suddenly ended. Instead of leaving, Perry returned, hell-bent on finding out what had happened. In order to incriminate Janice, the actual killer had subtly altered her medicine, and she had lied about her whereabouts that night. Due to the episode's terrifying impact on viewers, it was removed from repeats for more than 20 years. It was already famous when it returned to television in 1988. The program dabbled in something new and daring not long after that. One episode, The Case of the Twice-Told Twist, unexpectedly appeared in color in 1966 during the 9th season. The appearance was totally altered. The usual monochromatic atmosphere of the courtroom has vanished. In this one, a group of criminals dismantled Perry's vehicle. This was just an experiment by CBS to gauge viewer interest in a full-color 10th season. Raymond Burr's previously unseen blue eyes became apparent. It wasn't all roses, though. Some viewers felt the use of pink foam for fake blood gave the impression that the whole affair was staged. It was so fake, according to one spectator, that it was like seeing Bonanza in color for the first time. The show was abruptly canceled shortly after that episode. Therefore, that was the only one in color. Back in 1959, Perry Mason pulled off an unprecedented move. Nobu McCarthy portrayed the accused, while a young George Takei made an appearance long before Star Trek as part of the Japanese cast in The Case of the Blushing Pearls. Set in Little Tokyo, the episode included authentic Japanese eateries, music influenced by classic styles, and a storyline that paid homage to the culture rather than making fun of it. As an added bonus, the presentation included Bill Walker, the first black actor to have a speaking role in the role of a night watchman. An odd link to George Takei's future also exists. The episode included a reference to pearls from the Sulu Sea, which seems like a subtle hint to the part that would bring him fame later on. The problem is that not all daring moves paid out. A black judge made an appearance in 1963's The Skeleton's Closet. The appearance of Vince Townsend Jr., a real-life legal pioneer, as the judge should have been a momentous occasion, but he remained silent and went unrecognized. The entire trial felt artificial and lifeless, since the attorneys there never raised an objection because they were afraid of giving the judge directions. This wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. People began to write about the seeming lack of response in the news. To me, it seemed like the program was feigning progressiveness without delivering on its promises. There was an opportunity to tear down walls, but they chose to keep them silent instead. William Talman, better renowned for his portrayal of Perry Mason's stern and stiff district attorney Hamilton Berger, almost had his life ruined when he stumbled into a controversy on a peaceful Saturday night in March 1960. For some reason, that evening, cops burst into a residence in West Hollywood. Their supposed discovery became a media frenzy. Reports surfaced that Talman and many others were discovered in the room either undressed or partially clothed, and allegations of explicit films and images circulated in the media. The woman who would eventually wed Talman, Peggy Louise Flanagan, was one among those detained. Once a revered actor, Talman was suddenly portrayed as a criminal when the tabloids were merciless in their reporting, calling it a naked marijuana party. The others were also charged with indecent conduct and drug possession. Instantaneous harm ensued. Without waiting for the lawsuit to conclude, CBS dismissed Talman 4 days later. Without providing an adequate justification, they removed him from the credits, rescheduled filming, and removed him from the opening titles of the show. Despite the fact that 4 episodes had already been shot, his identity had disappeared. Worst part, by June, the court had thrown out the whole case because there wasn't enough evidence. The judge had ruled that the arrest had been unjust, but CBS would not budge. Talman might be completely replaced if they so desired. Despite Talman's legal clearance, fans were left without the familiar face of Hamilton Berger for an excruciating 9 months. However, he wasn't the only one. He had unexpectedly strong support from the Perry Mason cast. Both Raymond Burr and producer Gail Patrick Jackson were adamant about not letting the network off the hook. They were quite resistant, going so far as to suggest that contract renewal would be impossible without Talman's return. Hollywood seldom has fans that devoted. Not even the inventor, the always reserved Earl Stanley Gardner, could resist lending him his backing. There was also the part played by the fans, who sent a deluge of angry letters to CBS pleading for Talman's return. Critics of the show spoke in, stating that punishing someone who hadn't broken any rules was harsh and unjust. Every week, Talman lost a court fight on air, but behind the scenes, he had everyone rooting for him. Deciding to give in, CBS did it covertly in December 1960. There was no public announcement or apology. Instead, everything went back to normal. In his return episode, Talman omitted any reference to the 9-month trauma that had preceded it. As if nothing had transpired, he resumed exactly where he had left off. However, he never shown resentment, despite having lost a job, been publicly shamed, and almost saw his career go. With almost 200 episodes under his belt, he continued as Berger until the series finale in 1966. Hamilton Berger, he quipped, wasn't truly out of luck since, in an equitable judicial system, acquittal is a victory. In a field where second chances are so uncommon, it was a refreshingly modest viewpoint. Even while Talman was making a triumphant return to the spotlight, another Perry Mason actor was subtly moving away. Ray Collins's health started to decline in 1960 after having been a consistent fixture on the show from its inception as Lieutenant Trogg. He was unable to do much of anything, much alone breathe, due to the emphysema that had developed as a result of his smoking habit. His presence gradually diminished. Producers anticipated his departure and cast Wesley Lau in the role of Lieutenant Andy Anderson to progressively assume his responsibilities. Collins clung on for dear life, but his memory was failing him and the physical demands of the job were taking their toll. His final episode was shot in 1963, but it didn't air until early 1964. The squad was adamant about not letting him disappear even at that point. After portraying Perry Mason for over 10 years, Raymond Burr was exhausted. He had been the public face of the invincible defense attorney since 1957, but it had taken a toll on him behind the scenes. He was exhausted after long days of filming, never-ending scripts, and continuous motion. Working 14 to 16 hours a day, he had already endured 150 exhausting bouts by 1962. Despite his successful weight loss before to the part, he was now struggling to keep up with his demanding schedule and the stress that came with it. He wished he could just get out of there, change careers, or do something else. On the other hand, CBS was determined to keep him around, since they realized they couldn't function without him. On top of the continual emotional appeals, they continued throwing in additional cash and incentives. Even now, letters from fans, many of whom were writing to him personally, were pouring into the studio. Despite no longer having any interest in the job, Burr stayed out of fear of disappointing them or the group he had worked with for so long. Afterwards, 1966 arrived. Despite Burr's desire to go, CBS played one more trick on him by asking for one more season and promising a change. It would be shot in color this time. Color television was just beginning to take off, and most shows were still in black and white. So, it was a huge event. While just about 10% of households had color sets, that percentage was rapidly increasing, and marketers were shelling out substantial sums for color ads. CBS felt that by giving Perry Mason a vibrant new makeover, they might increase viewership. To demonstrate to Burr how it may seem, they even created a pilot episode. They played the loyalty card again, this time reminding him of the supporters, the past, and the promises. And he eventually said no out of exhaustion and frustration. Burr eventually caved. He was prepared to give it his all for one more season, so he agreed to do it. However, all of that changed a few weeks later. The news broke when Burr was at home reading a trade newspaper. Perry Mason had been canceled. He learned the same way the whole public did, without a warning, a meeting, or even a phone call. The performer had given his all to the part for 9 years and 271 episodes until CBS secretly cut ties with him. Their recent pleading with him to remain and their lofty promises made it all the more painful. The whole ensemble was startled by the treachery, not just the individual involved. Those who had been there from the beginning, Barbara Hale and William Hopper, were taken aback. Worse, filming had already begun on the last episode when the news broke. For some reason, that final tale, the case of the final fade-out, took on a metaphorical meaning. Everyone on the crew appeared on camera at some point, and in the last scene, Earl Stanley Gardner even played the judge. Some weird, bittersweet vibe pervaded the whole filming. It seemed as though the end came abruptly and dishonorably. The fact is that we should have seen this coming a whole year ago. In 1965, CBS took a daring gamble that almost certainly backfired. They shifted Perry Mason from Thursday to a time slot directly against Bonanza, the most-watched show on television at the time. Perry Mason had previously outrated Bonanza in the late 50s, but by the mid-60s, things had changed. On Sunday nights, Bonanza dominated the ratings, drawing in more than 1/3 of all American television viewers. Nobody could beat Perry Mason. Once among the most viewed programs on television, its ratings plummeted to the point that it was no longer even in the top 40. CBS was not hesitant to end the show when it failed to live up to their expectations. They had staked an impossible gamble. It was a hectic week in April 1966, from the 12th to the 19th, when filming for Perry Mason's farewell episode began. There was more than just a television show ending that week. There was a 9-year streak coming to an end as well. In spite of the most rigorous production schedule ever seen on television, the actors and crew managed to pull it off. Filming 271 episodes began in April 1957 and cost a pretty penny apiece, about $100,000 in 1957 dollars, or over $830,000 in today's dollars. The strain was felt most by Raymond Burr, though. He appeared in nearly every scene in the first several seasons. He didn't leave the property, he lived there. He once confessed that he had no existence outside Perry Mason. Starting at 3 o'clock in the morning, he would memorize lines, and occasionally he would still be doing it at 9 o'clock a.m., right before filming would commence. Burr wanted to quit after the 5th season because the pace was too much for him. Nonetheless, CBS persisted in convincing him to remain, and he ultimately consented to undertake a last season. The show's last season was groundbreaking since it was shot in color. The irony, though, was that CBS canceled the show only 3 weeks after Burr agreed to continue. Thankfully, there was enough notice for the producers to plot out a suitable climax, bringing an end to a series that had grown ingrained in American television. On April 19, 1966, the final day of filming, there was a mix of emotions. It was the conclusion of a period of innovative television drama. Don Anderson, an actor who became well known to viewers and crew alike, had made cameo appearances in more than 120 episodes. The universe of Perry Mason was meticulously constructed day in and day out for over a decade. And in that last week, it all came to a quiet but dramatic end.